bid to St. Francis Electric for the purchase, installation of traffic preemptive devices. Have a motion?
Second and a question.
Okay.
Almost a repeat of my comments about the homing. You know, are we just simply taking what we had before and saying, okay, this is what we should be doing now, or listening to the comment that was made by obviously a representative of the losing bidder? You know, how do we make sure that what we're doing now is state of the art rather than simply continuing decisions we've made in the past?
So Chief Rayone's here, and this was one of the projects that he worked on, so I'll defer to him because he's the one that has the direct knowledge of exactly what was done.
We are going to what we think is state of the art. We moved from infrared opticom emitters that flash, that send the signal, to GPS based. Both competitors are GPS based now and infrared. One company does both with the systems we currently use, is adaptable to our current system. Amtrak is a quality product as well as Opcom's a quality product. I've worked with Loop for a year now, a lot of information on them. We've got a tremendous amount of dialogue. We put out an RFP based on what we wanted. We got the feedback, they bid the process, and we selected the company.
So nothing you've heard here tonight from his comment makes you uncomfortable about our decision?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Frank, could you tell us, or tell me, if I'm the only one who doesn't know, how much of this equipment do we already have in the district?
We have 15 intersections currently. 15 intersections currently in the fire district that are infrared, optical infrared activated. We're going to newer technology, which is GPS technology, and most agencies are changing over to GPS technology, which works a little bit better. Infrared is line of sight, a direct beam has to come in contact with a light standard several hundred feet away where GPS can activate it a lot sooner. Our neighboring agencies, they have different varieties, different ones. We also want to be able to work with our neighboring agencies. We travel to Palo Alto and River City quite often, as well as they travel with us.
If we had an unlimited budget, say, how many intersections do you think in the district would need to be covered by this?
Unlimited budget? All of them.
I mean, not every intersection obviously has a signal or something, but are you saying all signals?
It only works with signal lights. What it does, it provides a signal light, sends a signal in advance to change the light to favor the direction we're traveling, to allow traffic to move through the intersection and stop at another direction, and open up the lanes for us to travel versus binding us up at a red light, simplistically put.
I have a slightly different concern then, and I know that the issue of equipment is certainly one to be discussed. And I don't mean to be ungrateful about Facebook's presence in the district and what they can bring here and contribute. But the thought that, a wealthy company, or today a wealthy company, who knows in 5 years, comes in and just kind of gets special fire services is a little bit distasteful to me in living in a democracy. I mean, why are we just dealing with intersections that are Facebook intersections?
You want to answer?
Yeah, well, I'll answer part of it. Part of it was, so going back to when we worked out an arrangement with Facebook, was what was the mutual benefit to Facebook, the fire district, and the community? So regardless of whether the call was at Facebook, all those intersections between the 4 primary stations that would respond, that's a benefit to the district, Facebook, and the community, because not every call is at Facebook. The system that we had been growing the system, different intersections over time. All the units were done. So to what I think Frank was going to say on this is that we've already been progressively working and gaining more intersections over time, specifically ones that were problematic around areas like Willow Road. Willow Road has traditionally been problematic because of the traffic. So those were identified. And in terms of where we wanted to go, as Frank said, if we had an unlimited budget, we'd add more all the time. So we've been incrementally adding them. If a project like the Rosewood Hotel came in, they would be on the hook to do part of that as well. So they've put the preemption devices up there by the Rosewood Hotel, albeit that, it's at the end of the district, it doesn't get as much traffic, but the light will turn green as well. So, there's different things that we've done, whether it's agency-based with a Facebook or a Rosewood, whether it's been district funds over time, or whether it's, just the maintenance budget for all these things is expensive.
Some of it I can understand, is tied like to a mitigation, you're bringing more traffic, and you wanna deal with that, and I can understand that. But that feeling, I have mixed feelings with it, again, I'm not slamming Facebook, I'm glad they're here, but this idea now that they're gonna have their own cop at Facebook, Menlo Park is putting their cop there, somehow this idea that a wealthy individual or a wealthy company can get super services where everyone else just gets kind of ordinary services troubles me a little.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that, I would love to change your mind on that. Facebook, I think, looked at, their criteria was, does it benefit us, does it benefit the community, does it benefit the fire district? And they were on board with that. So again, not every call for service is at Facebook. So all those signals will turn green for everybody else's call as well. Which is-
And they're putting a lot of money
That
on it.
police department, I mean, that officer can be used for a holdup or a robbery in the jurisdiction itself, or to support EPA in an operation. I mean, it's not exclusively for Facebook to use the individual. I mean, that police officer is gonna be available for calls for service, no matter where they are, if they need to supplement their personnel. I mean, it's not like they're drinking coffee in the cafeteria there, or eating or something,
Well, I actually spoke with them a little bit about this issue because it's been in the news recently. And essentially it was, this extra police officer is dealing with truancy issues too within the local school district. So he's being used or she's being used for a variety of purposes, not just for Facebook. And actually, it's mostly for the school and truancy.
One more
I have one
addition for the preemptions, any road encroachment for any new building in the area that applies for a road encroachment and digging up the roadway is also obligated to provide a preemption, like at Donahoe and University there, they put one in. And all these intersections that we're looking at are already high impact intersections that we are planning in the future as time grows or growth comes about, we're gonna put them in there. This is helping us accelerate the process, and this is clearly providing a better emergency response for anybody going in that direction. Ultimately, we're gonna keep adding till we have all our high impact areas all along El Camino is gonna require them because traffic has just grown so much over the years, and Willow Road is a parking lot. Trying to get there from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, it just can't be done. This is gonna aid all the communities going in that direction or coming in this direction to support it. So these things are a tremendous product for everywhere that we can put them in. Any way we can get the ability to put them in, it enhances safety in the community.
I have just a technical question then also, and that is, why is this coming out of the operating budget and not a capital budget?
That's a good question.
It's a good question.
I can give a good answer.
I think they moved the funds were held in a separate account, and to put it into use, we had to put them into the operations account. So the money was given to us, held in sort of a bank account, and to be able to implement it, we had to put it into an account we can actually utilize it from. It's an operational issue. I'm assuming that's I'm pretty sure that's.
I think, from an accounting standpoint, there would be some definition of what a capital budget item is. My guess is these things exceed that.
Well, generally, a capital item would be $5,000 or more.
Oh, is that right, that
Yeah.
high? I'm sorry.
And there were like 15 of them or something
Right.
like that, so.
There's 15 intersections and number of vehicles, so when you break them down, they don't come to over that amount.
So it's not the total contract, it's each individual unit?
That's right.
Okay. I just,
Good question.
Very good.
Anything else? Any other comments?
Do you have that ability to make comments? And again, I work with honor and pleasure after working with you for about a year on this project. Again, my main concern with the funds being allocated for this is that first and foremost, my belief is protect our company's monitors, protect those who protect us, and the GPS and radio-based system is absolutely a better product for the agency to look at and technology-wise. With all the trees and obstructions that you currently have here, the line of sight product that you had, the old Opticom, the Optimus product, never was really working very efficiently here for you. The system that St. Francis has presented in this is also a line of sight product. It is a radio, but it's a narrow band 2.4 gigahertz radio, which are going to have the same performances. And so my original presentation piece to this was that anything that a firefighter has to use goes through stringent testing, and anything that my belief is in the safety of the firefighters going through an intersection, so there's no collisions, that the people get out of the intersections are cleared in a timely manner and safe manner. And if the radios do not connect to those intersections in a timely manner, then it's an unsafe approach. And without fully testing a product, I fear for firefighter safety. And my original, speaking with Chief Brown, I made that argument is that we would provide the equipment to test before this went out to bid to show the two products in the worst case scenario in an area that's highly covered with trees, a curve, a hill, and it would show the performance of the two. Currently, the state and federal requirement is a 2,500 foot approach to an intersection, and I fear that you won't be getting anywhere close to that with the current product that is the winning bid.
Are these things backward compatible? Once we commit to this system, if we wanted to move to another system, are the units in the vehicles, would everything have to be changed?
Proprietary for their
It's
individual.
proprietary.
It's proprietary, although the GPS, the Opticom can be utilized in different systems on it. The GPS is proprietary on it, and one doesn't work with the other. So Amtrak won't work with an Opticom system, Opticom won't work with an Amtrak system.
And surrounding agencies are using,
Opticom.
Actually, they're using Opticom, the Santa Clara County, the El Camino Real from BTA, from San Jose all the way to Palo Alto are all Amtrak. The Santa Clara County Fire has sole sourced and sole spec the Amtrak product after testing the two. So Santa Clara County, although they're all using the optical product currently, they've literally just came out with a specification that Santa Clara County is going to Amtrak completely, as well as the city of Santa Clara, Sunnyvale, Cupertino, will all move to our product, to this product.
Do they have to carry 2 units then to?
Yeah, so currently your vehicles, because of 30 years of the optical product, almost all fire trucks now come equipped with a emitter, an optical emitter. There's 2 in this project that don't have them right now. That was part of the bid, was to supply 2 of those. So most, 30 years ago, technology was ahead of its time, and now it's somewhat antiquated. With traffic patterns increasing, the approach distance for an intersection, you need a minimum of sometimes 33 to 35 seconds approach, going 35, 40 miles an hour. You can see the distance, it goes anywhere from 2,500 to 3,500 feet. And again, a line of sight product won't give you that in most settings in urban and urban settings. Definitely won't. So my concern is, once you've committed to this, you've gone in the direction that you have this great donation from Facebook to help, and my concern is that before this bid even went out, the technology should have been compared and tested against each other, and that's I mean, you wouldn't put an air tank on a firefighter that you've never tested before. And my concern is that you've never tested either of the products to see which one works and what are any of the additional capabilities of the product. Our product is full ABL tracking and collision avoidance at the intersections, and that's nothing that was requested for in this bid.
I guess my view on this is much like the helmets. It's an issue about which I feel strongly, but I also defer to the professional expertise of the chief and the management team. I am certainly going to support this motion, but I would hope that as we look to the future, that we work with other agencies to come up with, particularly because of the interoperability issue, come up with a standard. And I would hope it's not, back in my science years, we used to have a specification for oscilloscopes, which was called the Tektronix standard. And the standard was written in such a way that only one company could meet the standard. And I would not like to see that. I like to see it much more performance related rather than design related. And I would hope that working with other agencies, either on a statewide or on a national basis, one can come up with a performance standard for these things. And that when the next time we bid, that we move much more to a performance standard than a design standard. Design standards are always really, really bad news because they always represent the current technology, whereas a performance standard is something that says, we don't care how you get here, but this is what it's got to do. I will vote to support this, but encourage the staff to look to other agencies to collaborate on the development of performance standard for future purchases.
We have done that. And there's more, I don't know if I need to get into it, but there's more than just the one issue that was brought up here. There's a lot of other things that went into this process and concerns we had for the bid that was more than just.
Well, that's why I say that I defer to your expertise. That's not
spent the year figuring
something
this out.
I bring to the table, but
No, so do
So
I.
quick question, Frank, so this price differential, it's $18,000-ish somewhere in there. Is there a quality difference for that price differential? Performance difference?
It's Chevy and Ford for the most part on it.
Okay.
One offers roll-up windows, one offers electric windows, the other offers bigger tires. They have different options, but they both are GPS-based products. And the one that we have, the equipment on our apparatus right now is Opticom. And adding one of the other issues, if we add M-Track on our apparatus, there's dual boxes sitting inside the cab. Another set of boxes on it. And it doesn't work with our neighboring jurisdictions. Palo Alto's Opticom, we go there. Redwood City's Opticom, they just purchased 7 GPS Opticom intersections over there, so they're incompatible that way. San Mateo County, the fire chiefs have all talked about it, and they said Opticom is the most common product in our county. M-Track is not in our county. M-Track is a good product. It's a very good product. It does a lot of things on it, and it's Opticom was the bid. It's a better bid, and Opticom fits our needs.
So then, this is where I don't have the knowledge and expertise, but how does stuff like this even get tested? I mean, you can test programs, software programs, Kindle devices, whatever, right? But how would you do something like this to compare?
Well, there can be generic tests that we can put on, or technical tests, or the experts going at it, and bring another salesperson in here will talk this product, and the third salesperson will talk this product, and every product is better than the other.
Right, but we would have to test to determine which one we would want, right?
Right.
So we've done
or
that.
we would have to be part of, there are a number of different associations, et cetera, which do performance testing
Right,
for particular kinds of technologies. And they develop performance standards. And then the question is whether or not, a good example of Underwriters Laboratory.
Yeah.
Underwriters Laboratory establishes a standard for a particular kind of electrical piece of equipment. And then when people go out to bid for something, they say, hey, it has to be UL approved. And that's the kind of thing that I would encourage us to collaborate with other fire agencies, with national associations, et cetera, et cetera. We're too small an agency to get into the performance development and performance standard business. You know, that performance standards need to be developed by people who represent a very large population of users.
You know, I get that. I have to defer to you as well, frankly. I'm clearly, this is not my area of knowledge, but I just, don't know if we've had
I have
like
to,
a maximum.
I have to defer to staff too.
Again, both very good products.
Well,
Both very good products,
Right.
both will do the job, they both have different nuances, so we put out an RFP with these specs, the bids came in, this is the award, and we're happy with the way the award came out with it, and we're recommending you approve it.
So when do we have to get a new, one of these things, a new system how long is this gonna perform to, does it get obsolete like regular
It does,
technology or?
the IRs are obsolete now,
Right.
the infrared ones
Infrared,
are obsolete, so is GPS. I'm gonna guess in 5 years, we're gonna have a super duper something else system out there. Technologies is beating us everywhere.
Constant, yeah. it's
So
constant.
we're going what we feel is the newest technology is GPS based, and they're both very good products, and that's pretty much the bottom line.
Thank you, Luke, for
Okay.
I had a couple more.
I mean,
I
it's
just-
obviously the decision's been made, but yeah,
thank you for.
Appreciate you coming, you know.
I think Chuck
And it
has a
stimulates a
question.
discussion, and I think the message that at least I'm trying to give is, let's constantly be looking to performance standards rather than design standards.
Right.
So Chuck,
And if my fellow board members think this one's tough, wait till we get to the fire engine
I
issue.
know.
And Seabright.
I'm relying on your help and knowledge, Peter, but I'd like to hear Chuck's question.
Oh, I wanted to ask, are these things ever centrally controlled?
It can be, they can be, they can be centrally controlled, it's more expensive, more technology, more cost, and there's a lot more that goes into it. They require readers and systems and tying into the intersections with Cat 5 lines or tying in with cellular lines to relay the data back and forth.
But the county dispatch center doesn't have this kind of,
They can do these, through a central dispatch and mark a trail and change them all for you. Again, that's a bigger than Menlo Park Fire, a bigger expense than we have. The technology is unlimited.
the other question I was gonna ask is there a maintenance requirement that goes along with the purchase of these things?
There is some built into it. There's a lot less maintenance with the GPS-based antennas than there are the infrared ones, because you have to go up and clean them, wipe them, adjust them, focus them every 6 months or once a year to do this. And those, thank God, we're moving away from those and going to GPS because it's a lot less. It's a radio signal, it's a satellite signal.
So in terms, Facebook is just fronting the cost of the equipment, not the maintenance or anything like that?
No. We're hopeful there's been very little maintenance. And actually, we don't know what maintenance is going to be because it's new technology.
Okay,
Call the vote.
call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke.
I'd like to acknowledge and thank Luke because he educated me quite a bit from the very beginning. I knew very little about traffic preemption, and he provided me with the most education in this whole entire system on it. And, it's unfortunate it didn't come out in his favor, but he's very valuable in this whole process.
and my working with the Menlo Park Fire has been, and Frank has been wonderful. Yeah, and my main reason coming here is just on the safety concern.
Well, I would encourage your company to really focus in on trying to get the various umbrella organizations to develop performance standards.
Well, there are actually some performance standards, and that's not, wouldn't be good. I think Chris, Frank, there are some performance standards, and I agree, there are some performance standards there.
21, consider and adopt a resolution, the fire chief enter into a contract with Lasano Concrete for repairs at Station 77.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
I just have a question. I know there's two of these things. Why, does something this size have to come to us? I thought this was within the chief's purview to approve or something.
Susan, you want to start with the fire?
The district's had a long-standing policy of having things that come out of the internal service fund come to the board because you haven't specifically approved them before, and this is one such thing. And I actually agree with you, Director Bernstein, and we'll be preparing for the finance committees before I get out of here within the next few weeks. Kind of a white paper and some of my thoughts about some of the practices of the past that you might want to change and why you might want to change them.
So that'll come to the April finance committee?
Yes.
Great, thanks. And in the meantime, we have these two items to look at.
So there's there's no written policy, it's just been the practice.
Yes.
Okay, and I would certainly encourage a change, because I don't think it's necessary, and I know you can hire a consultant for what, $10,000 or something, that you can't lay some concrete down for $6?
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
And the same as for item 822 as well.
Right.
Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're going to authorize the fire chief to enter a contract with Archibald Paving for Station 1 overlay.
I'll move.
Second?
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Item 23, consider the possible approval, consider and possibly approve the correction to the procedural error in the payroll processing of a salary adjustment.
Well, I'll move to approve this. I mean, basically to get the discussion going.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, discussion.
I like it.
Okay.
On May 28th, this had come up the first time to the board, and I voted against it. And the reason why I voted against it was because I asked for some type of compensation study, actually for it to be tabled, and it was not. When I went through the research material from January 15th, I'm getting all this, Michelle?
Well, I have a question. So are you saying, Ron, that this has come before the board for approval?
Yes, it has, in May 28th
From last year.
of last year.
May I clarify?
Yes, because that totally slaps in the face of why
What came to
discuss
the board, and it was in May of 2013.
Right.
What came to the board at that time was a salary schedule for the board's adoption that included an adjustment. I think at that time it was the elimination of the administrative leave and the buyout of administrative leave for the unrepresented managers, and the adjustment of the base salary for the unrepresented managers of like 2.89% for the safety and 3.2% for the non-safety, which was the position that's involved with tonight's report. And at that time, this higher salary formed the base for the adjustment that was made for the Administrative Services Director position. So what Director Solano was saying is that the approval of that resolution that night essentially incorporated this $9,000 to $10,000 adjustment in base. It was not called out in the staff report or during the comments that evening. So unknowingly, the higher base was approved that evening. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'd like to just take the opportunity of thanking Director Solano for bringing this to our attention. You know, I think it's an important issue. Having said that, I think that this is, to use a proverbial expression, water under the dam. And the only thing that I would hope that we can do is learn from this, that the salary adjustment procedure needs to have better checks and balances in it. I don't see a clawback remedy available to the board. And in the absence of a clawback ability, I think we need to and maybe the board in that action last year has ratified this, in which case further ratification may not be necessary. But certainly discussing it in public session, I think is quite appropriate.
Well,
Even though it may make us uncomfortable.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to.
There's already a motion on the table, and so we're discussing this.
Well, he can amend the motion, or he can make a substitute motion.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to. Thank you for your.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we prepare a letter to the employee stating that the mistake and the miscalculation, and asking for the amount of funding to be returned. In addition, that we report this to CalPERS, because she is in a new, and it's a bump in her salary over around $10,000. And it appears by the calculations that were done that it was a raise that she was not authorized to have. And I can go through the different dates here where she was benchmarked. On January 15th, she was benchmarked with the division chiefs. On August 6, 2008, she was again benchmarked with the division chiefs. May 28th, 2013, she appeared as a separate classification. And the difference is $10,935 more than the division chiefs, where she was originally benchmarked in 2008. So I would move, as I said, to refer that letter, since the past was the past, and it appears that during the time period up to that May time period where she appeared as an individual and not benchmarked with the division chiefs, it was a misrepresentation that was made. And I think if we condone something like this, I think this type of conduct is unacceptable.
Ron, when you said misrepresented, who are you saying misrepresented?
Well, it was originally where she was benchmarked with the division chiefs. And then in May, she becomes a separate classification as Director of Administration and not benchmarked with the division chiefs.
Who misrepresented is what I'm asking.
Well, when it was presented to us as a board.
Who presented it? I'm still...
Well, it was presented to us.
So, I'm just a little confused about the parliamentary procedure, and I don't mean to be procedure oriented, but we haven't, you've offered a substitute motion or an amended motion?
Okay.
Amended
Well,
motion.
It's
Because
the substitute motion, which has not yet been seconded.
that's correct. So why are we having a discussion on the substitute? I don't mind if someone seconds, I just want to make sure that we're procedurally doing this correctly, because I want the discussion.
Clarification.
Well,
Okay.
you actually can't, because it
That's
hasn't
right.
been
There
seconded
hasn't
yet,
been a-
so you
Right,
can't.
and there's been a second, and a motion and a second on the original
Yeah.
motion, which actually I think that needs to be discussed before you even talk about what the remedy would be, which is I think what you're trying to offer,
Well,
assuming that
Director
this motion
Carpenter said
gets.
that there wasn't
Substitute
a remedy.
motion, the substitute
Right.
motion,
He said that there wasn't a remedy, and
and the substitute motion takes precedence if it's been
Seconded.
seconded. And so far, we have a substitute motion without a second.
I'll second it, so to pursue the discussion.
I would like to ask council a question. Is there any legal basis for clawback?
We have only partially analyzed that question. The answer is somewhat complicated. There may be. The advice that we have provided is that in our opinion, given the numbers that we're talking about, it would be prohibitively expensive for the district to take significant steps. Of course, that doesn't preclude the simple step of drafting a letter, if that's something that the district wants to do. But we've only analyzed it to the point of concluding that it
You
would be.
answered my
Right.
question, you know, that
So, I actually have, I don't mean to interrupt you, Chuck, but I have a question for Susan. Under the discussion portion of this report, you said that, it's in that very top first long sentence. There's one part, or actually the first sentence, sorry, the end of the first sentence, to substantiate the appropriateness of the adjustment. What did you think was not appropriate with this adjustment? Or what did you hear was not appropriate with this adjustment?
In my opinion, the adjustment was not appropriate because it was not ratified at any point by the board of directors. Only the board of directors has the authority to set salaries. This was a salary adjustment that was not substantiated by a board action.
Okay, so it's really, you're saying that it's procedural? Because from what I'm reading here, it doesn't seem like it's just procedural. It says the subject salary adjustment came to the attention of the interim director of administrative services who undertook review of the district records and archives to substantiate the appropriateness of the adjustment.
Yes, meaning I looked at the archives, meaning the minutes and the resolutions to try to find if in fact there had been a board action at some point that would make this a legitimate salary adjustment.
Okay.
that's a very helpful clarification from my standpoint, because I think we do need to either ratify or not ratify this adjustment. If we don't ratify this adjustment, then there are other things we might want to think about doing. I am certainly inclined at this point, based on the facts that have been presented, to ratify the adjustment, not because I like it, not because I think everything was done in the proper manner, but simply because it's not clear to me that we have a really good alternative at this point. If we don't ratify it, and then we start down the road of trying to do a clawback, and we're here a year from now, and we've spent $6,000 on that, that's not a prudent use of our resources. Now, I'm very sympathetic to Director Solano's concern that we don't condone something which was inappropriate. That then, though, gets to the question of whether the individuals involved acted in good faith, or whether there was some malfeasance involved. And based on the facts in front of me, I don't know the answer to that question. So my inclination is to support the original motion to grant retroactive approval to this, at the same time recognizing that I think it points out a serious deficiency in the procedures that we had in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening.
So, and I agree with the second part about the deficiencies, Peter, but I hesitate to ratify something that was basically approving, giving the stamp of approval on something that was wrong. but I'm having a really hard time with this decision. And, my question is, how do we avoid this, and what else is out there before this, to whenever Susan, and I'm not blaming anyone, but what other situations like this are out there before this was even looked at? And how in the future, I mean, does it mean that anything like this comes before the HR and the finance committee to just make sure that we don't have this kind of situation again? I mean, I don't know what, maybe I'm just trying to be the Mrs. Fix-It right now, but to ratify something that was wrong, I think is not good, but to not to ratify it, it puts us in a conundrum too. Although I think issuing or writing a letter, knowing that we're not gonna get this money back, you know, maybe that's all we do, but that doesn't really solve the bigger problem of how do we avoid this from happening in the future. And I would like Susan to answer that.
I have not spoken with anybody else about this. Let me just tell you what my own personal reaction is based on 40+ years experience in local government. This was brought to my attention by employees within the district. I didn't independently discover this. I want to make that clear. And the people who brought it to my attention felt that it was an inappropriate action from the moment that it was given to them to process and to make the adjustments to the payroll system to implement. When I asked them why they didn't raise the question at the time, the response was that the involved employee was their boss and that she had a reputation of being retaliatory. So essentially what this says to me is that if you don't already have such a system, then there needs to be, I don't want to call it a whistleblower process put in place, but there should be, if you don't already have it, somewhere within your code of ethics or your code of conduct, a methodology whereby an employee that has such a concern could go to the board president and the chief and report that concern. That's how it's treated in other agencies. That's how it's dealt with in other agencies. I don't see why that couldn't work here. If that comfort level had been there 3 years ago, then you might not be here tonight.
Thanks.
You know, I actually kind of agree with Peter's rationale that we're never going to get this money back. But I'm concerned about public agencies, and I'm concerned about self-dealing kinds of things. We are so reliant on administrators and top executives in public agencies, and in the end, it's the citizens that get screwed by what happens. And sometimes it's for venal self-dealing, maybe somebody's money or their benefit. Sometimes it's larger issues. I mean, there were leaders 10 years ago talking about how the increase in pension benefits wasn't going to cost the taxpayer a dime and so forth because of what was happening in the stock market. And now where are those people? Well, they're off retired at 60 or whatever with huge pensions, and we're picking up the tab for that. I think there's a point where the public has to have some belief that its representatives will speak out about it, whether they're going to get the money or not. It makes no sense to spend $200,000 to collect $20,000. That would be insanity. But I think a letter is a very mild thing. I think, and I'm not a priest. I'm not here to sort of relieve people's sins.
Oh.
I don't have that ability to do it. If people made a mistake, let them live with their mistake. But who am I to sit there and say it's all blessed? And, so I'm going to vote against the motion to approve of an error.
Well, that's not
I think it's worth sending a letter. Maybe we'll find out something we don't know. It doesn't hurt. But I think that the success of getting the money back shouldn't be the standard to judge how our behavior should be on it. Perhaps there was nothing wrong. Perhaps it was all done right. Let's find out. It hurts us not at all to at least inquire about it. I think, how shall I say, one of the things that I think holds society together as a glue sometimes is this long lost sentiment of shame. And just bringing stuff up, sometimes people do the right things because they know they didn't do the right thing originally and they can make it right. Let's at least let such a process work. And I'm not even suggesting that that's what happened. Let's find out. And I think a letter is a perfectly appropriate thing to do. So I'd like to support Rob's alternative motion here and suggest that before we ratify an error that we actually inquire into it and see if we can get any information about what happened.
We have,
I have I like, there's some words that are being used that I think we really need to try to focus in on. One of them is error, the other is wrong. The error that's been identified is a procedural error in approving the salary increase. There have been some discussions about whether the manner in which the individual obtained that salary increase was in some way incorrect or wrong. I think those are different issues. I recognize they're somewhat difficult to separate, but the issue before us is the procedural error, which was that the increase in question was not properly approved. And the reason why I'd like to focus on that is that I think that by focusing on that procedural error, we stand the best chance of making sure that something like this does not happen again. If we want to now shift to the question about whether or not the employee in question did something wrong, then I think we enter an area of discourse and discussion which requires a whole new standard of respect for that individual's rights and abilities to be heard, rather than to be judged without having the opportunity of presenting his or her side of the case. Now, Director Solano may suggest that the letter is an invitation to engage in that kind of discussion, and if it were written in an appropriate way, it might well be. But I worry from some of the comments here that the letter would be a letter which presumes malfeasance and says, you did something wrong, pay us back. I'm not prepared to come to that conclusion yet. And the agenda item is not a disciplinary issue with respect to the behavior of the employee. The agenda item is the procedural error with respect to approving the salary increase.
For the lack of approval.
Yes.
So that's a nice way to sidestep it, Peter.
I'm not sidestepping it. I'm trying
That's
to
what it
divide
appears to be.
I'm trying to divide the question into two pieces. One of which is, and one way to deal with, if you want to.
You had employees that came to her and told her that there was going to be some type of retribution against them if they reported this incident. I mean,
I understand
to do the letter to find out what her side of the story is.
Yeah, I watched Linda sort of sitting there and cringing at some of this. We're talking about an employee's behavior, and she's not even been put on notice that her behavior is under question. She's not been given the opportunity to speak. I think there's a due process now. One way to avoid what you call sidestepping is to say, okay, take the primary motion which is on the table and move to table it. And we'll defer action on the procedural correction. We're certainly doing one of the things I know you were concerned about, which was making sure that this issue got discussed in a public forum. So that's being accomplished. The substitute motion, I think, needs to be greatly clarified in terms of, are we making a presumption of wrongdoing and asking for repayment of funds which were misappropriated? Or are we entering into a dialogue with a former employee to try to understand what happened?
So I would agree, Peter, about possibly tabling this because of this specific employee, I think that it can be very emotional, and in some ways, I agree. What would the content of that letter be? And maybe this discussion right now needs to happen. I don't even, can I even make another substitute motion to table this?
We could have 3 motions on the table.
Yeah.
Why don't,
Let's
why don't we
not.
just have somebody interview
It's up to
her?
it's up to
No,
the
let's
board
not have
whether-
three
I mean, I think you should try to resolve where we are now first before.
Well, let's have someone, we have plenty of investigators to interview her
Yeah,
and
I
find out
believe
what her side of the story is on this.
You know, I want to take a minute here.
Thank you.
I've got to speak apart from you. Would you like to say your
Don't have to
piece?
say anything.
President Ianson, can I make my comment sitting down?
You may.
Yes.
Thank you. I promised myself I was not going to say much about this, but I think I have 2 things to say. I've had a number of employees ask me to come and say something this evening, and I told them that whatever I said would be really brief, and it will be. But I will add a little editorial comment because, as the chief knows, I cannot resist. It's not possible. I'm just going to make my plea to the board about this issue, which is that you handle it in whatever way you handle it. Whatever investigation, whatever vote, whatever approval or non-approval or attempt to recover or whatever, in precisely the way that you would handle it if it were someone way, way further down the food chain. If it was a rank and file employee, a regular firefighter, typist, clerk, mechanic, or whoever, and that you handle it no differently than if it were a rank and file person. I will say one thing as an observation, which has, by the way, no particular implication about wrongdoing or not wrongdoing, but just an observation after having watched this board for now 7 years, which is that with regard to the flagging and discussion and logging and notice and particulars with regard to the salaries of rank and file employees, there is not only 1 vote, but 2 vote every single time on the MOU, and if there are salary increases during the MOUs, those come up for additional notice even though they've been previously approved in the MOU, and they get voted on again, and in theory could be voted down because it's a vote, it's not on the consent agenda. We get lots of notice, there's lots of discussion, and people come and they talk about our salaries. What I've noticed in the materials that are submitted every time there's a management increase is that there's never as much, and there's never as much discussion. And I think all we want is every single one of us comes here, every person that I represent and all the rest of the folks, they all come here they're really proud of the job they do. They love working for the fire district. Whatever travail there've been over the last however many years, they still identify deeply with the work they do, and they're deeply proud of it. Every one of them comes here and does a job. And I think they all just want to get the same amount of attention or non-attention, concern or non-concern. And I think that fits right in with the democratic ideals that were advanced earlier on another subject. I have a lot of experience with these kinds of things in the past, and I've never had an instance where someone didn't come after our member for the money, but every circumstance is different. And whatever circumstances here and whatever you find, I'm only hoping that you handle it exactly the way you would if it was a firefighter or a typist clerk or a mechanic or anybody else. That's all.
Thank you. So, the motion that's on the floor right now is an alternative motion.
Substitute motion.
I'd like to move to table the original motion. Can we do that?
Let's deal with this
No, we
substitute
can't.
alternative first.
Have to deal with the motions in order in which they are. I think, Matt, I'm correct.
Yeah, except that I think there can, this is somewhat up to the president, but there could be
A
three
substitute
motions.
motion.
You could have a second substitute motion, which you would then vote on first.
Right.
Vote on the last motion first.
Let's
The-
do
The
that.
president could refuse to have a fourth motion,
Or
but to
third.
the extent a third was made to table the original motion, you could handle that first and then move to the first substitute motion. The more motions we get, the more complicated.
Well, I want to table it.
So you move to table.
To table
You
the
said
original.
You want the original? You
I
want the alternative,
wanted
what?
to table the original motion. I wanted to make a substitute motion to table I want to make a motion to table the original motion to consider, the possible approval of the correction of a procedural error in the payroll processing.
I think that's what Chuck suggested. And so
That's, I
he's,
know.
it's his motion. I suggested maybe the order was inappropriate. Matt's clarified that we have flexibility. I would suggest that Chuck's motion be the motion which you second.
Yes, that was the one I was trying to make when I was told that it wasn't gonna happen.
Maybe next year you'll get to make that.
Can we get a verification as to what the motion is?
So I
Are
believe.
you ready?
I believe there are now,
A substitute motion, Chuck, if you want.
Wait a minute, Michelle, I'm sorry.
I believe there are now 3 motions on the table.
Yes.
There's the original motion,
Yes.
there's Director Solano's substitute motion,
Uh-huh.
there is Director Bernstein's second substitute motion to table the original motion. We should vote to the extent you're done with discussion on the last motion first.
The last motion is not subject to
There's
discussion.
no discussion on the table.
Not if you
True.
table.
Excellent point.
That's right.
Alright.
Well,
That
wait,
should be
wait,
voted on
But
first.
doesn't the president have to say whether or not he will accept this third substitute?
No, I
motion?
think the third motion should be accepted. If we got to a fourth, the president could
Okay.
refuse the fourth. This is somewhat procedurally, we get into where there's no official rule on this. We're going by kind of Robert's rule.
Right, no, I know, but I mean, it was.
So the
But
motion
yeah,
on the
typically it would go between 3 and 4. would be
So the
the-
motion on the floor is to table the original motion.
Yes,
That takes precedence over everything.
yes.
There's no discussion of that. It's either
That's correct.
you in favor of it, those in favor,
Are you calling the motion?
yes,
I'm in favor of it.
okay. Those that are opposed to tabling.
Bizarre.
Come on, you can't
The
have it
motion
both
carries.
ways.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, hold on. Okay, well, if it's,
Well, no, why are we dissembling? I mean, you seconded it.
no, I didn't second it.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's a motion.
And it didn't have a second.
Well, then we
I
don't
didn't
have,
have a second. That's what I, there was.
Well, then it's not a motion.
then we don't have a motion.
There was no second.
Okay.
All right,
There was no
so-
second, right? There was no
I
second.
thought that you seconded it. but
No.
So we do not have a second to table.
No, so we're back to the 2
Okay,
motions
so
on the
we
table.
are done with the table. Not
My
tabling.
question is, can someone please read the second substitute motion?
Alternative motion was to send a letter asking for,
I can read it again if you like.
I'd like Michelle, the board clerk, to please read the second.
The
Substitute.
second substitute motion was to write a letter to the employee, request that the money be returned, and report to CalPERS the error, I guess you could say, as the employee is an annuitant.
Okay.
And so there was a first and a second for
Well,
that.
I really didn't say that.
No?
No, I did not.
That's why I'm
My
asking.
motion was, I moved to prepare a letter to the employee stating that the mistake or miscalculation, asking for the amount of funding to be returned, and then in addition, report the discrepancy to CalPERS. I want to be sure that we're not accusing her of anything, a mistake or a miscalculation in this letter that Matt's going to draw up if we pass this.
That was not the original substitute motion. Didn't include that last part. Which is,
Oh, you wanna play the tape back?
It did include that?
But I think he wants to clarify his motion.
Okay,
whatever
that's
that
fine. I
is.
mean,
Do an adjectives, adverbs?
no, I just want clarity, because I think this is an important issue, so there should be clarity
Michelle,
on the process.
Would you read,
No, it's fine,
her
Bob.
the motion? Well, you said you wanted clarity. I mean,
No, no, no,
Michelle's the
but-
one who's
but
writing the
it's- I
motion
think
down.
that- Well, she
So there's a motion on the floor,
Right,
is
so
there a
I'd like to
second?
call the question on this substitute motion. Or call for the vote, well, same thing.
Well, see, there's no second for it.
There was a
Yeah,
second.
there is-
Peter
Oh,
Carpenter
it
is
is
a
the
second.
second, oh, I second.
Yeah.
Or so, I'm sorry,
I beg
Chuck
your
second.
pardon, I got lost in the motion. Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion?
There will be
Well, she's
discussion.
called the
I called the question,
Okay,
so we need to take a vote.
all of those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed?
Name.
I'm opposed. Okay, so it failed. Okay. So that takes us back to the original item number 23, which is to consider and possibly approve, consider and possibly approval of correction of procedural error in the payroll process of the salary adjustment.
And so that motion has a second.
Yeah.
So we can still discuss that motion.
Yes.
Yes.
So I have a question for Matt. If this does not get ratified, what would our options be?
You wouldn't lose any options. We could agendize this again for closed session and discuss further, under the realm of anticipation of potential litigation. We could discuss it that way again. It could come back up on the regular agenda in the future. You could drop it altogether and live with the lack of board approval of the adjustment. I think you would still have every option available to
So
you.
we could still do a letter that's more considerate, right?
And you could re-agendize this, you could discuss it in committee or agendize it again as a board to discuss additional options going
Okay.
forward.
I'd be very comfortable tabling this with the intention of, between now and such time as it comes back to the board, that there be some additional fact-finding. And I don't want to presume the mechanism of that fact-finding nor the outcome of that fact-finding. I think discussion with the employee in question would be useful. I think discussion with the employees who raised the question about the appropriateness of this would be useful. And then I would ask or recommend that it come back because of the nature of the issue and the provisions provided in the Brown Act as a closed session discussion. Which would then be reported out to the board in open session.
I'd like to second
So
that,
then-
but I don't know how we're gonna word it, but I think we may be tabling it.
Yeah, so the
Well, we're
motion
giving
is
direction to staff, so we're not making a motion. If the motion to table, if we make a motion to table and the motion passes, I would hope that this discussion conveys to the staff the concerns of the board, that we would like to have more facts about this situation and to better understand what the potential remedies are.
So are you,
So you
So-
already have a
Table
motion
that-
to
to
table.
vote.
So I will make a motion to table the motion that's on the table.
and I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion to table and we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. So it is tabled.
And Rob, I would like to just, again, thank you for holding our feet to the fire on this issue. It's an uncomfortable one. And my concern is that we treat everybody involved with this fairly. And Linda, I really appreciate your comments that that standard of fairness needs to be the same for everybody.
So Rob, I want to thank you too. I know that there's been a little bit of tension, but I think this end result is probably right now the best way that we can go.
Can I ask though about this idea of writing a letter? Maybe we could talk about how we might write that. I agree with Peter's point that a letter should not be accusatory. I think it could simply state that there was, that this matter was not approved in the normal way, and we're trying to develop some information on it, and we would appreciate any kind of response about how it came about, what was presented, what documentation was presented, and just ask for facts, because if we don't ask for them, I don't think we're going to get this.
So what's the
Clarification
direction
is
staff?
the clarification is that, I want, the word "we" needs to be very clearly understood. We, the board, are not doing anything. What we have done is conveyed our concern to staff and encouraged them to provide additional facts. So I don't want you to have the impression that the action we just took said that we are writing anything. We're not.
Put it back to us.
Yeah.
Well,
The chief
I mean, I'm
to
not disagreeing, but why not? Why couldn't the board say we want
Because
to write a letter?
we voted not to do that.
Well, there was a specific letter that I think had some overtones that.
Yeah, but we didn't, but that
No,
didn't
that
pass.
didn't pass.
That didn't
No,
pass.
no, I know,
Well,
but
I'm
that's
suggesting
what
that
Chuck
maybe
is saying
to
is
say
another kind
A
of
different kind
letter.
of letter, where we're
Right.
simply doing what you said, we're inquiring into the facts.
I think the "we" here needs to be understood. The board is not the investigating body in this case. What we have asked the staff to do, perhaps with the assistance of counsel, et cetera, is to further investigate this matter and report back to us. The method of their investigation, whether it's a letter or face-to-face, et cetera, is a matter
For them to
for
decide.
them to decide. If you think the board needs to write the letter, then make a motion and we'll discuss that.
Well, I don't know that the board needs to write a letter. I was simply saying that it seems to me a letter would be a good vehicle to develop the facts that we're all interested in. And I'm concerned the staff might take our vote to infer that they should not write a letter. So,
I didn't say anything about that in my comments.
no, but we brought up a letter, we said, no, we're not going to write a letter.
The board is not going to write. The motion was that the board would write a letter.
I'm not sure I was.
As far as I'm concerned, this is a chief issue. This is a staff
This is a
management
motion.
issue that
Yeah.
he and his staff needs to deal with. I mean,
Right,
and just like Linda said, it's an issue that needs to be addressed as every other employee, firefighter, clerk, or whatever.
Right, yeah, but that also includes getting notice.
Getting no, and
Every-
all, I mean, if it's gonna be an accusatory thing and staff feels that they're comfortable with that, that's their decision. If they wanna write a letter saying it's a miscalculation, or whatever they wanna do relative to that, it's a staffing issue. And it comes to, the reason why it came to us was, well, I don't wanna go into it over again, but it's a staffing issue that's involving the chief and his senior management staff to make it fair and right. And fix it.
Chuck, I think the staff knows our concern, and it's just up to them on how they can handle it. And can that be reported back in one of the committee meetings or something? Status update?
I think.
Or closed
I think
session,
it's a closed
whatever.
session,
Okay, yeah.
Well, why would it be, we've discussed it in open session, why would it be a closed session?
It'll be the HR issue.
Because what I heard being discussed was that staff was to develop additional information and report it back in addition to a recounting of what options are now before the board once you have this additional information.
Yes.
Yeah, so it becomes a
What
personnel
authorizes
issue.
it to be a closed session, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Because depending on what the staff discovers, what information it gets back through this process, it may or may not be potential litigation. And that would be up to the board to decide what course of action you wanted to take. That's the,
But it's not because it's a personnel issue, because this person's no longer an
No,
employee.
it's potential litigation.
Okay.
And even if the board has expressed the sentiment that litigation wouldn't make any sense at all, it's still a potential litigation?
Well, we're asking them to look at the facts. And
Do you think
we don't
it's-
want to prejudge what, as they get more information, what those facts are going to say.
But I'm trying to understand if it's up to them, once they have these facts, to determine, yeah, this could be litigation, or it couldn't be litigation, in which case they could bring it back to open session.
Director, just one of the, I've, regardless of whether we're dealing with an employee who is a current employee or a former employee, I've never, typically you would discuss results of an investigation into an employee or former employee's action in closed session. To provide, to provide some cover.
Confidentiality.
And
Well, that's what I'm trying to be
confidentiality
precise
regarding
about. It's not because it's potential litigation then, it's because it
that.
involves.
Well, I think it's both. I mean, honestly, I think it's both.
Means what we would do for any employee.
Yeah. And if it were a current employee, we certainly would not have been, it's an odd situation that we have a former employee, which is one of the reasons that it allows us to discuss it in open session somewhat. But I think people have been very discreet in discussing it here, and that's appreciated, and I think it would be better, this is a conversation that I think frankly Linda and any employee representative would agree is better held in closed session, so long as the board is acting.
Do you agree with that, Linda?
Yes.
Which also involves, under most circumstances, the opportunity, the individual involved has to be given notice.
Yes.
If we're talking about a disciplinary action, if we're talking about malfeasance, et cetera, you cannot schedule a closed session meeting to discuss those matters without the individual being given notice.
Okay, I'll give you my opinion. As long as it's only under consideration, as long as it's only under investigation, I can tell you my folks don't have a right to know. It's when it's being discussed, do we have anything, I'm sorry to put it this way crudely, but do we have anything, do we not have anything? Is there really something there? Is it worth pursuing? While investigation is going on, the individual has no right to notice, except of course, I think firefighters and police officers do what everybody else in the world does. Okay, when somebody decides to run charges against someone, actually file charges against someone, then they have full notice, and they have every right. And of course, if there were an investigative process, of course you'd ask the person. I mean, what? We're gonna ask ourselves, or you're gonna ask yourselves, or?
But that's also somewhat why it's a little bit different here, because we're dealing with a former employee, so what we're pursuing is really under the guise of whether we would be pursuing litigation against the employee, because we're not pursuing a disciplinary action. There is no way to discipline the employee. It doesn't work here.
Well, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, that brings us to public comment number 3, which is not a big deal.
Actually, Rex, I want to say something, may I?
Yeah.
Or you can close the meeting so I won't be out of order.
No.
I sat on the board when all this happened, and I'm hearing the polite term of salary adjustment. From what I heard from many other employees of the district, spiking is more accurate. And look at the timeline that this event happened to the month of September when this employee left.
I have no comment.
No, I'm not asking for a comment. I'm making a statement.
Okay.
This hasn't come up. Spiking is a matter of words, salary adjustment, however you want to call it. But this employee retired, left the fire district in September, and this event, according to Rob Solano's information, happened in May. Is that correct, Rob?
Well, January.
Point of
You
order.
know, we're not-
We can't have this
We
conversation.
give direction to
Not-
staff, as far as
Okay.
I'm concerned, that's their job to do an investigation.
I agree.
They will come back to us,
Well,
and that's,
plus-
for me, is the end of the discussion.
Okay, that's
Plus,
fine.
there can't be a discussion between, you can't
Well, I
respond to
am
the
one,
public.
so just,
Not you, but,
no,
Oh, this is in the chief's.
stop.
Okay.
so I make a
Move
motion
to
to
adjourn.
adjourn.
I move to
Second.